Hello, members of Cohort 15 and Dr. Gregory. Today, I'll be presenting on crisis management strategies of chief academic officers. Specifically, my research focused on identifying the key elements of an effective crisis management strategy for supporting continuity of instruction during a crisis. Now, there are a multitude of crises that threaten to disrupt instruction, so I chose to narrow my research specifically to the crises of public health emergencies and natural disasters. I'm very passionate about this topic, and so it's difficult for me to condense and compact all that I would love to share today into a brief presentation. However, just to give you a brief roadmap, I'm going to provide an overview of the role and responsibility of a chief academic officer, as well as a brief overview of both public health emergencies, natural disasters, the decisions and key elements that have been observed, which are the actions and responses of institutional leaders and the chief academic officer during these crises, and the takeaways. So what are the key elements that can be implemented to support effective crisis management in the future should crises occur? All for the fundamental reason of maintaining instruction to students, which is at its core the purpose of higher education, to educate students. So briefly, the role of the chief academic officer, or otherwise known as the provost, is the responsibility of overseeing the academic functions of the university. The common theme throughout research is that the president is ultimately responsible for the overall performance of the institution. However, the chief academic officer, or provost, is responsible for the achievement of that performance. So certainly a lot of pressure and responsibility resides on the individual that holds this position. You think of a hierarchical structure. There are different colleges, different departments typically within a university. And so a department head or a college dean typically will then report to a chief academic officer who oversees each of the divisions and departments. They also oversee many other elements related to accreditation, faculty development, recruiting new faculty, and reviewing institutional goals, and as well as disciplines that they would like to pursue in the future. That is just a very simplistic, quick definition, just for the purposes of our presentation today. So thinking through the lens of the chief academic officer is thinking through the priorities of educational quality and educational delivery. How do we continue to provide instructions to students in a method that is both rigorous and effective in reaching students during a crisis? So as I mentioned, there are a multitude of crises that can be either short-term, they can be temporary, or they may become more long-term. And so chief academic officers must consider the specific needs of each division, of each college, and how they might be affected. Yes, a formal or a general framework should be provided for the institution. However, a intro level speech class may be more easily adapted to a different alternative instructional method. However, a senior level chemistry lab certainly is going to present additional challenges to do so. And so whether it's short term or long term, these are elements that should be evaluated, should be considered. So the chief academic officer, first and foremost, should be familiar with the potential barriers to the continuity of instruction in the event of different crises. So specifically for the presentation today, we'll review first public health emergencies. So at the forefront of everyone's minds, of course, will be the COVID-19 pandemic, as this was experienced most recently on a global scale. So during the pandemic, there were many adjustments made. We tend to think through adjustments of moving to online and remote learning. So in the example that I provided, chief academic officers were faced with thinking through how to do so and how to ensure that faculty and students were doing so with ease, while also having to think through the difficult challenges of how does a chemistry lab, how does a biology course or an anatomy course or engineering or very hands-on practical instructional environments, how do they transition to an online or remote learning? in such a way that is both in line with the requirements of federal and state regulations at that time. So definitely many challenges. A lot of research suggests that chief academic officers are now facing the challenge of a new generation of students that both expect and anticipate to receive these remote and flexible options moving forward as a permanent option. So now that crisis mode has maybe has come down, the expectation of some of what has been offered remains the same. And so this is certainly a challenge that is being presented to chief academic officers and institutional leaders. And then natural disasters. Here in DFW, we are not strangers to the occasional ice or snow day as we're coming into the winter season, or during the spring and summer months. DFW and North Texas can experience storm systems that produce hail and winds and in severe cases, tornadoes. These certainly are threats to the continuity of instruction, as these storms, pose a threat to campus facilities and to electricity and to other elements that could disrupt or cause a temporary delay for students to receive their instruction. And so those are certainly elements to consider. I personally grew up in the Houston area, and so hurricanes were a reality that I'm very familiar with, and the ways in which that it threatens to disrupt the educational system, especially higher education. We think through situations such as Hurricane Katrina in 2005 and how officials at Tulane were forced to evacuate students and also determine if they could continue with the fall semester. Some programs were unable to, some of the more hands-on practical. However, the Tulane medical system, as well as some others, were able to adjust to the Houston area. And so there were some elements that were able to be adapted fairly quickly, but certainly numerous challenges existing in that situation. A study in 2012 at Monmouth University found that students following Hurricane Sandy on the northeast coast were greatly affected, even if they directly did not have any impact to their families or their homes or their educational experience. But that being near a traumatic event such as a hurricane that was experienced there in New Jersey had effects on the academic motivation of students. And then again in 2017, Hurricane Harvey in the Houston area, officials of the University of Houston, at Rice University, Texas Southern University, were faced with many challenges related to the continuity of instruction as well. And so one key takeaway that I will get to in just a moment, but university officials at the University of Houston and the chief academic officer found and placed an emphasis on continuing to offer not just the courses, but also offering the auxiliary student services, the tutoring, the library and research resources, ensuring that those things that were seen as essential and vital to the traditional classroom setting were also not overlooked during a time of crisis. And so briefly, as a map of the Hurricane Harvey landfall, as you can see, it's greatly affected not just the Houston area, but much of the Houston coastline, as there are numerous institutions and colleges all along the area here where institutional leaders were faced with great challenge. And specifically thinking through whether it be short-term or long-term, how to continue offering instruction to students until operations could resume as normal. So as key elements that I observed and took away from the research that I found, there are 5 key elements that I will share with you. And the first being communication. Communication being the core of so much of crisis management strategies, but specifically for the chief academic officer, ensuring that faculty, both full-time and adjunct that may be more separated from the typical university communications or structure, ensuring that there's clear communication to all faculty, staff, and students, essentially all stakeholders. That's also clear and understandable, making sure that communication is not something that has to be deciphered. It's something that is very clear and understood, that gives confidence and hope to individuals in the event of a crisis. And then training. In the event of the COVID-19 pandemic, research found that many adjunct and full-time faculty members that were older in age were not prepared to adjust to remote or online learning, as they may have been less familiar with some of the technological resources that a younger generation of students are utilizing. And so this is certainly an essential element to an effective crisis management strategy for maintaining continuity of instruction, is ensuring that your faculty and your students are familiar with and are prepared to utilize online or other resources. Thinking of training as well, ensuring that if one facility on a campus is affected by a storm or plumbing or electricity issues on one day, that if they have to move to another location on the campus, that faculty members are familiar with the computer systems, the projection systems, the things that might be utilized in that place, should they differ in any way. So ensuring that training occurs, whether through faculty developments, online trainings, requirements for the course to have an online session or two each semester. There's certainly many options to utilize for this. And auxiliary student services, I mentioned previously about the University of Houston, but identifying and recognizing that if these services are seen as vital to the traditional setting outside of a crisis, then they should be seen as just as essential, if not more so, during a crisis. So chief academic officers said, yes, focus on the continuity of instruction. Is the professor instructing the students? Are they able to receive this instruction? However, are they also able to receive the support that they need for their academic pursuits? And predetermining resource allocation priorities. So this is where a financial element comes into play. Many crises occur rapidly, and so decisions have to be made very quickly. And so one of the best actions that a chief academic officer can do is to, as a precautionary measure, partner with a chief financial officer or the director or vice president of an information technology division to recognize and identify areas for investment in the technological resources for online or remote learning, or for other specific needs related to math and sciences or engineering or agriculture. What are some of the needs that can be protected beforehand? How can investments be made? Certainly, maintaining relationships with community partners is essential as fundraising and other financial means become prevalent during a crisis. However, there are certainly actions that can be taken beforehand of the chief academic officer in partnership with other institutional leaders that will greatly support the university efforts in maintaining instruction to students. And then finally, ongoing evaluation. The 15 days to slow the spread at the beginning of the COVID-19 pandemic became quite extended, as many of us now know. And so ongoing evaluation is so important, so essential to the response of the chief academic officer. As crises evolve and adapt, so should the response of university officials. One simple adjustment during the COVID-19 pandemic was to extend spring break by 1 week. While this was a great deterrent, and many accreditation agencies were making exemptions and considerations for this at the beginning or the onset of the COVID-19 pandemic, simply delaying class instruction did not continue as the option that was viable, as federal and state regulations quickly led to multitude of students quarantining, unable to visit in person for traditional class instruction methods. And so ongoing evaluation, university officials had to quickly adapt and adjust to the situation as it evolved. So that is such a key element to maintaining instruction successfully. So again, this is just a brief overview of my research. I hope this has been helpful to you. Again, I'm very passionate about this topic, and so if you have any questions, please reach out, and I would love to have a brief discussion and talk through this a little bit more. Thank you very much.